before, years ago, I felt pressured when you'd initiate sex.
Yeah.
But now, since you've adopted this healthier mindset of mutual fulfillment, I feel honored, I feel cherished and cared for. And when I feel that way, I'm much more inclined to engage fully, and I enjoy our lovemaking.
Welcome to the Blended Family Coaching Show, where you'll discover how to move your stepfamily from just surviving to truly thriving.
Grab your headphones and listen in as we share practical, real-life strategies for building healthy bonds,
Understanding the kids' perspective,
romance and partnership,
parenting with great teamwork.
and yes, even co-parenting with a difficult ex.
We're Mike and Kim Anderson, and we believe with the right tools, every step couple can overcome the common challenges of stepfamily life.
Join us for authentic and sometimes comical conversations to discover how you can lead your family with confidence and create the future you really want.
Well, hey there. Welcome. We're so glad that you're joining us today. If you've been tuning into the show for a while, and if you haven't already left a rating or a review, we would so appreciate you doing that now. You can give us a star rating over on Spotify or on Apple Podcasts. If you have just a few extra minutes, you can even write a review there as well.
Yeah.
Well, we'd love to hear your honest feedback. And if you'd like to suggest a topic for the show, then head over to mikeandkimcoaching.com/share. You can just fill out the form there and let us know what would be helpful for you. We may just create an episode from your suggestion.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So here we are already in February. I can't believe it. And that means that Valentine's Day is right around the corner.
Yep.
In fact, if you're listening on the day that this episode releases, you actually only have 6 days left.
Ooh.
And Valentine's Day happens to fall on a Monday this year. It's kind of weird. So we're guessing that many couples might be making some kind of plans for Saturday or Sunday instead rather than a Monday.
Yep.
It's kind of not the greatest day, right?
Sometimes it's not.
Yeah. And if you're making plans for Saturday or Sunday, then you have even fewer days than you thought
All right. You better get after it.
to plan. Yeah. Now, if you've forgotten all about Valentine's Day, it's not even on your radar, well, then you're welcome for the reminder. And luckily, you've got time to plan something special.
For sure.
Speaking of celebrating Valentine's Day, we thought it might be valuable to share about a topic that for some could be part of that celebration.
Oh, yeah? What's that?
Passion and sex.
What? Can we say that on the podcast?
Yep, we can.
Wow.
However, this is the first time we've ever had to mark the episode as explicit.
Yeah, that's right.
In more than 2 years of podcasting.
I know, yeah,
first
we've never
time.
done that.
And that will be the case for the next few weeks because for February, the month of love, we're going to talk about a few different aspects of sex. We'll explore some of the common experiences of just about every couple, as well as the unique dynamics and the challenges that can come into play specifically for blended family couples.
That's right. So, not that you usually listen to our show with the kids around, but if your typical habit is to listen in the car or an earshot of the kids, you might think about changing that up just for the next few weeks.
Right.
And we just want to say up front that we're not experts in this area.
No.
We're not sex therapists. We're not counselors. We're not researchers. But we do have 21 years of experience navigating through our own personal struggles.
That we
and
do.
We've done a lot of in-depth learning using some materials who do come from experts, right, on our issues, both individually and as a couple.
Right.
And we want to discover some healthy ways to approach this very personal, sometimes sensitive, sometimes confusing, and sometimes even frustrating topic of sex.
Right.
And now we have the privilege of coaching couples who are navigating some of these same kinds of things. And so we've learned from that as well. So we hope that this discussion over the next few weeks is going to be valuable for you and maybe help you be intentional when it comes to growing passion in your marriage. We all want more passion in our marriage, I think. So speaking of past experience, honey, I'm wondering, what do you remember about our first date?
Well, I do remember that it wasn't really a date.
Yeah.
It was more of an impromptu idea to have a picnic. Well, we were kind of just killing time between a mutual friend's wedding ceremony and their reception, right? Remember, there was several hours of time in between.
That was weird. It was like a morning wedding and a evening reception, basically. Yeah.
So we were really just friends at that time. We'd been friends for a while. We worked together.
Yep.
But we ended up going on a little picnic that day, and something happened on that picnic that day that was really surprising to both of us.
Yeah.
And it sparked a bit of romance for us.
Yeah.
Do you remember that?
Yeah. I think it was just really sexy how I used the cement curb to bust the top off that bottle of Martinelli's because we didn't have a bottle opener, right? And you were like, "Ooh," right?
Was that where the spark came from?
Is that what it was? I don't know. I like to think that, right?
Well,
maybe it was kind of manly and sexy and romantic all at the same time.
I was impressed, but I don't think that's where the spark came from.
Oh, you don't think so?
That was impressive, though.
Maybe it was a little bit more than that.
Right.
But you're absolutely right. There was a spark, I think, that neither of us expected. We were truly just friends.
Yeah.
We didn't really acknowledge that spark right away, but it wasn't long before we had a pretty vulnerable talk about our thoughts of dating each other and specifically some of the concerns that we had, right? We talked about all kinds of things. We talked about the fact that you had a child, so we would be forming a step family if it went that far, right?
It's complicated.
We talked about our age difference. We've got an 11-year age gap that has created some challenges along the way. We talked about the challenges that each of our histories might create and the work that we both really still needed to do to heal from some of our past. Because we both have had some real struggles all the way back into childhood and even in previous relationships. And in that early conversation, I remember that we talked about sex.
Yeah, I think we did, or at least in one of the first conversations.
Yeah.
And it was a really important conversation for us because we were both at a place where we were still struggling with a lot of regrets from some of our past relationships and some of the decisions we've made in the past.
Sure.
And there were all kinds of unhealthy patterns in my previous marriages and also in your previous relationship as well, honey.
Yep.
In fact, it had only been about 5 months since you and your fiance had called off your wedding.
Yeah, that's right. I was engaged when I met you.
Right.
Now, you didn't have anything to do with calling that wedding.
No. And, some of the healing that we both wanted to work on was related to our sexuality.
That's right.
We both made some regretful choices in the past around sex, and we didn't want to repeat them. So in this early conversation, we both acknowledged that sex seems to change things in a relationship. It just does.
Yeah, a lot of research that shows that.
Yeah, and it starts to become the focus, and it can even make us blind to some other dysfunctional things that might be going on. That's what we had experienced in our past relationships.
Right.
So we realized that neither of us had actually experienced the kind of relationship that we really wanted. Kind of got hijacked by that. And so during that initial conversation, when we talked about what our relationship was going to look like, we agreed that we were not going to engage in sex in our relationship.
Yeah. We wanted to just kind of keep it out and say, well, what does this look like to just have a relationship and try to be really healthy?
Yeah, and focus on other things.
Absolutely. So needless to say, things went pretty well, right? If we fast forward only 3 months from that time, things were going so great for us that we got engaged and we started planning a wedding. And by then, we were pretty proud of ourselves that we had maintained this boundary around sex. And we thought, well, why don't we keep that going? Let's just be you and me, and let's not complicate things with that. And we decided that we were going to hold that boundary until the wedding day,
which wasn't easy, but we were committed.
And it was something we'd never done in previous relationships. We'd never experienced a boundary like that before in our lives. So we planned our wedding for a Friday night, and it was a bit later in the evening to be sure that, all of our guests could make it after they had their work day and all of that. And I remember it was probably the world's shortest reception, right? We were like out of there. Yeah.
Yeah, we were really anxious to leave.
Yep.
And we had some hors d'oeuvres prepared, and a couple of people made a few short little speeches. We cut the cake, and that was it. We were out of there, right? We hugged our friends. We hugged our relatives. We took a few pictures, not many.
Yeah, not many.
No, and we headed out.
Yep.
And I remember when we got to the hotel that you had actually come to the hotel room earlier in the day to prepare it. You put flowers in the room, and you stocked it with chocolate-covered strawberries, and you spread rose petals all over. It was very romantic.
Yeah.
I was kind of swept off my feet.
Yeah, that's good. I wanted that first moment of passion for us to be special and memorable.
And it was.
And that it was. Yeah, I agree. And then our honeymoon trip to follow was, well, let's just say busy.
Yes.
Yeah, we were very interactive.
Yes, there was.
We'll put it that way.
There was no lack of passion for us early on.
Right.
It's often said that blended family couples don't really get a honeymoon because you hit the ground running, right? Kids are already in the mix, and you've got the hecticness of family responsibilities and schedules and all of that going on. But I'd say that we had a little glimpse of a honeymoon season even after we got back from our trip.
Sure.
Because in our unique dynamics, we had my daughter Annika, she was 5 at the time, moving between our home and her dad's home every other week.
Right.
So that meant we had 50% of the time just us.
Right.
So we actually did get a lot of great bonding time together.
I agree.
And I remember early on in our marriage, we just couldn't seem to get enough of each other when it came to sex.
Sure.
The passion meter was high.
It was high.
But unfortunately, that didn't last for us.
Unfortunately, no, it didn't. And it wasn't any single thing that began eroding the passion in our relationship. It was really many things that seemed to pile up on us over many months. And I'd say somewhere between 18 months and 2 years into our marriage, sex actually became something that created pressure for us rather than being a pleasure.
Yeah, I'd agree with that.
Yeah, I mean, sure, some of it was just the fatigue that hit with the addition of a new baby at that time, right? We had an ours baby,
right?
Plus the typical busyness of family life, and we also experienced some typical difference in our sexual drive and desire.
Right. And after we had our second ours baby, only 17 months after the first one,
right,
that really heightened the difference in our libido, right? So our rhythm ended up getting way out of sync.
Right.
But I'd say the biggest challenges we faced in our sex life over the years are centered around 2 things. First, healing from our histories, hurts, and hang-ups from the past, all the baggage we brought in.
Right.
And second, the complexities and the confusion that came with navigating blended family dynamics, specifically when it came to our experience around the trapped teammate and the stranded stranger.
Oh, for sure. I agree with that.
That impacted our sexual relationship.
It totally did. And if you're not quite sure what those terms mean, we're going to put a link in the show notes pointing you back to all the way back to episode 21, where you can learn a little bit more about it. So in a nutshell, as the trapped teammate, Kim felt stuck between choosing me and choosing her daughter in a multitude of different ways. And then as a stranded stranger, that was me, I felt stuck kind of on the outside, feeling like I was a bit of a third wheel in this whole thing. And that challenge followed us into the bedroom, creating some really dysfunctional patterns. And if you go back and you learn about the stranded stranger trapped teammate dynamic, you're going to hear us tell some stories about a painful season that hit about 10 years into our marriage where we were on the verge of divorce. And the primary issue was around parenting challenges, which many step couples can relate to. But what we haven't really talked about much was that a secondary challenge we were experiencing in that same season was all about our fading passion. And we discovered that we're not the only ones who've had to work through those significant challenges when it comes to sex and marriage. We've heard from many couples how difficult it can be to navigate a healthy relationship inside the bedroom. Sometimes it's just as difficult as everything a step couple's navigating outside the bedroom. And the truth is, one impacts the other. What if you could experience a community that's all about healthy support, guidance, and practical strategies that help you thrive in your blended family? Well, now you can. Blending Together is a supportive community for blended family couples just like you.
Mm-hmm. We've educated and supported hundreds of couples navigating the unique challenges of blending a family. Now we're inviting you to join our community and experience the transformation that awaits you. But you'll need to act fast because we're getting started soon.
Mm-hmm.
Blending Together is not just another community. It's a place where you'll find practical, real-life strategies for building unity as a couple.
And creating more connection as a family.
Experiencing partnership in parenting.
And even dealing with that difficult ex.
Blending Together is a safe, growth-focused space where you get to connect with us and, maybe more importantly, with other blended family couples who truly understand what you're going through.
Mm-hmm.
Along the way, you'll discover practical tools, guidance, and hope that empower you to find a future full of confidence and connection.
When you join Blending Together, you'll get to hop into a variety of resources like access to our private Facebook group and online learning platform, monthly coaching meetings, monthly Q&As, and you'll even get to vote on the content for our monthly workshops.
Mm-hmm. Blending a family can often leave couples feeling alone or isolated and stuck, and quality support can sometimes be expensive. That's why we're offering you access to all of this at a super low monthly rate, because every blended family deserves the opportunity to thrive, regardless of their budget.
That's right. So join us in the Blending Together community and unlock the secrets to successful blending. Together, we can create a future filled with hope, connection, and peace. But don't wait. Click the link in the show notes now. The doors will be closing on October 8th, and you don't want to miss out on this unique opportunity to create the future you really want alongside other couples who genuinely get it.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, we can't wait to meet you there.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
So we're going to get pretty vulnerable, and we're going to share a few of the specific challenges that we've experienced over the next couple episodes. But for right now, let's talk about why passion and sex is important. What is a healthy mindset around sexuality in marriage? And then we're going to also talk about some things to consider when it comes to having a healthy dialogue around sex with each other. How do we talk about it? It's not easy.
It's not. And so we're going to unfold a bunch of those things over the course of about 3 episodes.
I mean, we've been married almost 21 years and we're still trying to figure this out.
Absolutely.
So first, let's define what we mean by passion. Passion is both sensual and sexual and is driven by desire and physical attraction.
Okay, that's good. I got a lot of that.
Passion is something that comes easily and naturally in the beginning of every romance, but often the excitement of passion is one of the first things to start waning. For most couples, it's simply unrealistic to expect that this level of attraction and passion will continue in the same way over the long haul as their relationship matures. And this waning of passion is common for most couples, and it can be magnified by additional challenges, much like we've experienced in our own personal story. And this is when we might start to feel dissatisfied or disconnected from our partner. When the passion dwindles, and we're left wondering, what happened?
Yeah, what the heck happened to that?
We might even start to wonder if there's something wrong with us. And the tension or even fear can increase as our passion decreases over time.
For sure.
And this is certainly going to impact how we connect on many levels of our relationship inside and outside the bedroom.
That's totally true. But I think it might also be true that most of us want to experience that burning passion that we had back in the beginning. Like, I know I wouldn't refuse bringing back some of that passion that we had in those first couple of years, but that can be challenging in the day-to-day kind of exhaustion of life, when maybe we're not feeling very attractive, or our partner seems to have lost interest somewhere along the way. But the truth is, how a couple engages each other sexually reveals patterns of interaction that reflect other aspects of their life together.
Yeah.
That makes it sound like sexual passion is really, really important. But just how important is it?
Yeah, that's a good question.
Yeah.
We love this quote from Ron Deal's mom, Barbara. She says, "Sex is an important part of marriage."
Okay, I like Barbara.
But not that important.
Oh, I don't know if I like Barbara.
Got to listen to the whole quote.
That's right.
Sex is an important part of marriage, but not that important. Now, what Ron's mom means and what the research shows is that sex contributes to a healthy marriage, but a healthy sexual relationship doesn't necessarily result in a healthy marriage. You better have more in your relational toolbox than just good sex, because sex is just part of the picture. We need to keep a realistic perspective on the role and significance of sex in marriage.
Yeah, we certainly need to keep that perspective. And, you know, just the way you describe that right now makes me think, well, yeah, like we were hot and heavy for a good 18 months to 2 years. So if that was all we really needed, then why would anything have dwindled? Right there, we would have just been, you know, off the charts and would have been fine. But in their book, The Smart Stepfamily Marriage, Ron Deal and David Olson unpack the findings from the National Survey of Couples Creating Stepfamilies, which is the largest study of remarrying couples with children. Which is the largest study of remarrying couples with children from previous relationships ever conducted.
Wow.
The study examined over 50,000 couples. That's over 100,000 people, right? To discover the qualities that best predict highly satisfying relationships. So Ron and David dedicate an entire chapter of that book to the topic of sex.
Right.
They call it the sex connection. And in the chapter, they pose this question: is sexuality important to the overall health of marriage? The surprising answer was no. But they quickly go on to say that's from the standpoint that sex in and of itself is not enough to form the foundation for a relationship or to sustain it. But they go on to say that yes, sex is important in the sense that it increases intimacy and feelings of closeness while acting as a significant bonding agent for partners. And the absence of sex can lead to a negative drain on a marriage. So I guess Barbara got it right. It's important,
she did.
But it's not that important.
Right.
Now, another thing to note is that the research revealed that sexuality, including sexual expectations, affection, matters of desire, and how a couple communicates about sexuality, is the 7th most important predictor of a high-quality step-couple relationship.
Does that surprise you?
It does. And I just heard a whole lot of guys say, what? Seriously?
7?
It's all the way down at number 7? I know. Like, I would have totally guessed it was higher, too. But that's what the research of 50,000 couples revealed. Now, remember, 50,000 of those 100,000 people were guys. Right? So anyway, like I said, Ron's mom got it right. Sex is an important part of marriage, but it's not that important. There's a whole lot on the list that's above and beyond sex that impacts the satisfaction that we experience in marriage, but it's certainly in the top 10 based on the research.
Right.
Yeah.
So while it's not everything, sex is certainly important. And if we're lacking clarity in our sexual relationship, there's naturally going to be tension and disconnection.
Yeah.
And it seems to me that some of our confusion about the meaning and purpose of sex comes from the culture around us.
Sure.
And the messages that we're bombarded with every day, right?
Totally.
Steamy, spontaneous sexuality is immersed into the marketing campaigns and social media, movies, television, reality shows, even song lyrics, right?
Yeah.
The list goes on and on.
For sure.
Our culture is steeped in this idea that sexual gratification is the ultimate goal. But sadly, that messaging tends to water down the true meaning and purpose of sexuality and it distorts the reality around what it takes to maintain passion in a relationship over the long haul.
Yeah, for sure.
And when we set our expectations based on the fiction of the media around us, and then those expectations don't seem to match our experience, sexuality can become confusing or even frustrating. Our thinking can get shaped by our culture's unrealistic elevation of sexual ease and pleasure, right? It should be so easy.
So simple, yeah.
Yeah, and we naturally compare that to what's actually happening in our own relationship.
Yep.
If we start to believe that we're missing out or there's something wrong with us, it can quickly lead to feelings of dissatisfaction, loneliness, or sometimes even suspicion.
Yeah, and that's why I think mindset is so important when it comes to sex. You know, we've heard it said that the greatest sex organ is your brain.
Yeah.
You know, knowing what you really believe about sex within your relationship and then being able to hold fast to that, regardless of what the sexually charged culture might say, is critical to your sexual experience with your spouse. And honestly, their experience with you too. You know, over the years, I've come to develop a pretty simple mindset around sex for our marriage that I believe is healthy, especially a lot healthier than what I maybe started with.
Right.
And it encompasses our sexual connection both inside and outside the bedroom. So my mindset is that sex is not about my individual gratification. It's about our mutual fulfillment.
Unpack that a bit, honey.
Well, you know, in different seasons of our marriage, I didn't always believe that. When we were struggling relationally and I was exhausted from work and tensions tended to mount,
right,
I simply wanted some relief and a release. And while I've always wanted to be connected to you, there have been seasons where I was just focused on getting my own selfish need for physical gratification met. And when that was happening, honestly, the quality of the sex reflected that, right? I was focused on me. We were disconnected emotionally. And even though we were having sex, it was just empty.
Right. Yeah.
We were disconnected, and disconnected sex is just not good sex, at least in our experience. And the way that Ron and David put it in that book we were talking about is that the meaning of sex is so much more than just whether or not partners experience sexual pleasure. It's about connecting the deepest parts of ourselves to another person, resulting in a spiritual oneness that's unlike any other experience on earth.
Wow, I think that's so good. That's so right on. We've had some great sex over the past 21 years, honey. But you're right that we've had some not so good sex as well. And the difference is typically tied to our emotional connection at the time. And that's not typically a message you hear from our sexually charged culture.
Yeah,
right?
they don't really highlight that a lot of times. Sure.
The reality is that great sex is more than physical gratification. And that description from the book that you just read is really a beautiful picture of that heart-to-heart, soul-to-soul connection that we all hope to experience in our relationship. And you're right. In order for us to have that kind of experience, we've got to get some clarity around our mindset towards sex. Otherwise, we're chasing after something we can't even define, or worse, something that doesn't actually exist. So what is that mindset around sex that you mentioned again? I think we all need to really think about this.
Yeah, we do. You know, the mindset that I've developed is that sex is not about my individual gratification. It's about our mutual fulfillment. And when I can remain focused on that mindset, it changes how I care for you in our daily lives together, the way that I speak to you and the way that I pursue you. Right. It also changes the way that I show up in the bedroom, honestly, trying to be attentive to you and your needs. And the way I think about our sex life now compared to 21 years ago is very different. And I think it's changed a lot for both of us, probably for the better.
Yeah, absolutely. I would agree with that. I think before, years ago, I felt pressured or sometimes even disrespected when you'd initiate sex from the mindset of your individual gratification.
Yeah.
And when I went along with it, I'd later feel resentful because it felt like sex was focused on pleasing you. But now, since you've adopted this healthier mindset of mutual fulfillment, I feel honored, I feel cherished and cared for. And when I feel that way, I'm much more inclined to engage fully, and I enjoy our lovemaking, because then it really becomes more about experiencing that heart-to-heart, soul-to-soul connection.
Yeah.
It goes beyond just the physical.
Yeah.
So for everyone listening, we want to challenge you to consider your mindset about sex. What kind of mindset will really bring connection, satisfaction, and mutual fulfillment to your relationship? Clarify your healthy mindset and then hold fast to that, regardless of what the world around you might be trying to make you believe. Even on Valentine's Day, there's pressuring messages out there.
Sure, yeah.
And I think part of clarifying it is sharing with your partner what you believe about sex.
Yeah.
And that leads us to another element that has impacted our sex life.
Yep.
That's our ability to have healthy dialogue when it comes to our sexual relationship.
Definitely. You know, it's kind of funny. If someone 10 years ago would have told us that we were going to spend time talking about sex and even being vulnerable about our own sex life on a public podcast that anyone in the world can listen to with an internet connection, I think we probably both would have laughed in their faces.
Yeah.
The reality is that 10 years ago, we could barely even talk to each other about our own sex life.
That's for sure.
Yeah.
We had such a hard time being vulnerable and open with each other when it comes to sex. And only over the past, 5 or 6 years have we really gotten to understand each other at a much deeper level.
Right.
We've learned to hear each other's perspectives without getting defensive. And we've learned to ask for what we need and want without blaming or shaming each other.
Yeah.
It's amazing how things have changed in this area simply by learning how to dialogue about sex in a much better way.
Yeah. And, I bet we're not the only ones who've struggled with this kind of thing. Both the mindset and the communication piece. Because, part of the reality of blended family life is that we've come in with at least one partner having at least one sexual history.
Right.
Most of us have come in with both of us having that history. And we've set up thought patterns. We've set up habit patterns. We've set up expectations, all kinds of things that sometimes reflect our experience from the past. But what we want to get locked into is, what do I want for my present?
Yeah.
What do I want for my marriage now?
Yeah.
And that's why it's so important to examine our mindset and consider our communication.
Yeah. And really clarify.
Absolutely. And you know what? When it comes to communication, it's been a game changer for us. Writer and philosopher John Ruskin once said, when love and skill work together, expect a masterpiece. I love that quote. Communication is a skill, and it's one that we can all learn. And being skilled in communication is key in marriage and certainly critical in the area of sex.
Oh, yeah.
I think we have this idea that sex should just happen. It should be natural and spontaneous and fun all the time and all that. And we shouldn't have to have a talk about it. And honestly, I wish it was that way. I would love that. But the reality is we've got to learn this skill of communication around a sensitive area that can get us kind of charged up sometimes.
Yeah.
Earlier we were talking about the culture around us and its influence on sex. And it's kind of interesting to me that, while we do live in a highly sexualized culture, it's also something that seems to be so hard to talk about. I mean, you and I both grew up in homes where sex was rarely mentioned, maybe not at all, outside the occasional just don't have sex talk from our parents, who clearly weren't skilled at talking about sex, right? So both of us ended up having to just learn for ourselves about sex, which unfortunately led to some really regrettable outcomes.
I agree. And the truth is that with just a little healthy, open communication and some vulnerability, so much of our sexual experience together can improve.
Yep.
And it impacts that mindset you were talking about earlier.
For sure.
And I think part of the skill we need to learn when it comes to healthy sexual dialogue is that we need to communicate about what we believe, our mindset, and we need to talk about some of the functional realities of our sex life too.
Sure.
Things like our differing sex drives and expectations around that.
Yep.
It's been huge for us,
absolutely,
right?
Yep.
We have very different libidos, and that's created some significant challenges to creating a good sexual rhythm in our relationship.
That's right. And, over the years, we've not been that great about talking with each other about that. And for me, that libido difference translated into me feeling rejected and sometimes even feeling deprived. I couldn't understand the difference between you not desiring sex versus you not desiring me personally. They were like connected.
You had a story in your head.
Absolutely. And we had to learn to dialogue in a way that you could express that you simply weren't desiring sex in those moments, even though your desire for me was not evaporating.
Right. Like you thought.
Yeah. That's been a really difficult conversation for us over the years. And we're going to share more about that actually in the next episode next week. So make sure you come back for that.
Yeah. And that's linked to being able to share the realities around some of our histories, our hurts and our hangups, all that baggage that come with our sexual past.
Yeah.
Sharing some of that has been really difficult, sometimes embarrassing. But I've personally discovered that once we learn to share the realities of the emotional hangups that we both came into this relationship with, it's been really freeing to be able to share and to be known in that way without it turning into big arguments and hurt feelings and pulling away from each other.
Yeah.
But it took us some time to learn how to do that and a lot of work and practice.
Yeah.
And it seems like we're finally getting to a place where we can dialogue about sex in a healthy way and really talk through some of those hangups.
Yeah, yeah. I think maybe lots of couples struggle with that because it's easy for passion to be high early on. And then, thinking that in that early season, like we said, 18 months, 2 years, the first season of our marriage, kind of getting into this mindset that it's always going to be like this. Yeah. But when it starts to fade, it's really hard to figure out how to talk about what's actually going on, right? Yeah. And I feel like, we're both really known now, which has, again, only been the last 5 or 6 years.
Right.
So the first 15 years of our marriage, we really struggled.
Yeah. I mean, I would say that's one of our biggest regrets is we didn't learn how to do this better early on, because I think we wasted so much time stuck in our own emotions and feeling shut down. Yeah,
I totally agree with that. And, there's one other area where I think it took us a while to build some dialogue around, and that's being able to effectively communicate our likes and our dislikes from a bit of a practical standpoint or a functional standpoint, right? That can be really difficult sometimes. It can feel embarrassing to talk about, what we like or we don't like in the bedroom. And it also sometimes can trigger some fear if one of us really doesn't like something that their partner desires. And, that's not a fun argument to have, right? It's like, oh, well, I want this. Well, I don't want that. Well, that's no fun.
Yeah.
And sometimes we fall into that belief that our partner should just know what we like, right? But neither of us are mind readers. Right. We can't be clear on that. But having healthy dialogue around this can actually bring some great improvements to your sex life. And it's awkward. It can be difficult. But remember that communication is a skill. And that's great news because skills can be improved. So if you're struggling with healthy dialogue around sex, I promise you can make it better.
Absolutely.
Now, we're not going to get into teaching about specific communication skills in this particular series on sex, but you can go back to episode 50 called How to Openly Communicate What You Really Want to learn about assertive communication skills, and that can really help in this area. And just to clarify, that episode is talking about what you want in your relationship. It's not an episode focused on how to communicate what you really want when it comes to the bedroom.
Right.
That's not. But the skill of assertive communication, it works in the bedroom and outside of the bedroom.
Absolutely. And learning how to communicate your wants and needs in a healthy way is critical, again, not only in this area of sex, but really in every area of your marriage.
For sure.
So here's what we want to challenge you to do over the next couple days, maybe before Valentine's Day, that's coming up quick.
Yep.
First, examine your mindset about sex in your marriage and decide what you might need to adjust based on maybe something you heard today.
Right.
It's never too late to adopt a healthy mindset around sex in your marriage that's focused more on mutual fulfillment rather than individual satisfaction. Les and Leslie Parrott say this: as any long-term happily married couple can tell you, the excitement may decrease, but the real pleasure can still increase.
Yeah, I think that's true.
That's such a hopeful message.
Absolutely. And I think, after 21 years of marriage almost, I think we're discovering that.
We are, absolutely.
Yeah. And you know what? Ron Deal says, if sexuality is approached selfishly, couples will likely experience gridlock around these issues. But a humble, flexible attitude that seeks to serve the other spouse can help couples build a bridge toward sexual connection. I love that. It's all about the mindset of that mutual fulfillment, like we've been talking about. Now, secondly, so Kim's challenging you to think about your mindset, really examine it and clarify it. And secondly, we want to invite you to initiate one small conversation about sex with your spouse. You might choose from one of the kind of categories that we shared today. We talked about libidos, either how they're different or how they're similar. That might be one thing to talk about.
Your drive.
If one of your libidos is lower, talk about the difference between a lower drive for sex versus a desire for your spouse, that they're not the same thing, right? Having a low libido around sex doesn't mean I don't want my spouse anymore.
Right.
And so talk about that. You might talk about hurts or hangups that you could share from your past.
And we're going to talk more about this next week. But for now, you might choose something just small.
Yeah.
If you've never talked about this before, we encourage you to take it slow, start small, or maybe just share one part of a bigger story for now.
Yeah, that's right. But it might be a place you need to talk. Or you might initiate dialogue about your likes or dislikes. Maybe with Valentine's Day coming up, you can focus on what you both enjoy sexually and how you might enhance your connection. But talk about ways that you can experience that heart-to-heart, soul-to-soul connection that Kim talked about earlier.
Yeah.
All right. So consider those two things this week, your mindset and some healthy dialogue when it comes to sex in your marriage. And then we want you to meet us back here next week.
Yeah, next week, we're going to talk about the challenges that surround sex for couples. We'll talk about some of the common challenges that just about every couple faces.
Yep.
But we'll also share some perspectives on the challenges that are unique to those of us living in a blended family dynamic.
Yeah, for sure. There's some, definitely some dynamics that come into play and all that.
Yeah.
So think about your mindset. Initiate one simple piece of dialogue and then meet us back here next week to examine some of the challenges. But that's going to make this episode a wrap.
Until next time.